Namaskar and a very good evening, dear friends. Team Hingori Sutras extends a very warm welcome to you. The hierarchy of pleasure. What does that mean? Well, when we requested Hingori to do a session with us and we were in the middle of a discussion with all the possible topics we would have liked him to talk about, out of the blue, he comes up with the hierarchy of pleasure. Stumped, we asked him, we knew about pleasure being in black and white, as we read in the books written by Hingori, that, in the seesaw where there is happiness on one end, there is sadness on the other. Hierarchy of pleasures was introducing us to the subject of there being layers of pleasures in between, and with shades, which is something which is beyond our understanding or comprehension. So let's ask Hingori today, where did this come from? Why has it come? What does that mean? And how do we understand or apply it in our lives? So a very warm welcome to you, Hingori, and in my signature style, आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है.
So Anjali, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
So by and large, Anjali, the art of manipulation of human minds needs variation. So my whole mission in this life is to manipulate all your minds. And the idea is to manipulate them towards your inner self. And in order to do that, sometimes you have to come up with different ways of approaching the same subject. So in a way, this might be considered to be what you might call a sequel to a talk that we did, maybe a year ago on lokas. That was an interesting talk. Most people had no clue about these lokas. They had heard about these words, but they really did not understand that, well, most of us have to be in one of those lokas after a few years. So that was the significance of that talk. Today, I also wanted to do a kind of a sequel to that, because I wanted people to realize that, it's great to have these theories put across and say, this is good, this is that. We can read various scriptures and understand what they are saying, even if we do. But how do we actually implement them? How do you actually reach those higher levels? What is that strategy for ascent? And that is what this talk is about today. But I wanted to alter I didn't want to make it a very simple, straightforward talk. So I thought, let me give it a twist. And the twist that I have given today is how your pleasures or your choice of pleasures and your type of pleasures can actually take you up or stop you from going up. Now, after we've heard this talk, which I recorded, because number one, my throat had packed up and I didn't know whether I'd be able to talk live for so long. But so I recorded it, and I also thought it'll be crisp, because I wouldn't stray from a subject and go into some side roads and then come back. So that's why this is a recorded talk. And after which we will sit and chat about any questions that you might have. So please go ahead and do this.
Sure. So ladies and gentlemen, let's get on with the talk. Let's hear that. Take out your pencils and your pens and your notebook, make notes, do your analysis, and be ready with a whole lot of questions at the end of the session. So here we start off with the hierarchy of pleasure.
One of the most common human desires is the quest for happiness, pleasure seeking. Having studied this subject quite deeply, I charted out a completely different course for myself. The concept of happilessness. To put it in my favorite language, neither ikde nor tikde. My error of judgment was that I looked at happiness or pleasure as a single emotion. rather than being multi-layered. I finally realized that I had understood pleasure only at its lowest level, completely oblivious to higher levels. It was only when I experienced the higher levels of pleasure beyond the sensory ones that I found it easy to correlate these to the different levels of consciousness. If you compare the story of the Kundalini and its oscillation between the chakras, you will find a perfect fit. So let us examine this theory, agree or disagree with it, and finally decide what levels of pleasure you want to glide at. One oscillates between the various levels on the ladder of pleasure, from base animalistic pleasures to refined godly ones. So let's get grounded at the level of the Mooladhara, or the first chakra located at the base of the spine. Let us first examine base pleasures and reflect the extent of our association with it. The Mooladhara chakra, or level 1. This is the home for pleasures like greed, insecurity, and sensuality. The lowest chakra, Mooladhara chakra, corresponds to the Bhulok or the earth plane. It controls the sense of smell and aspects of life necessary to survive and thrive on earth. The pleasures experienced at this level are those of sexual indulgence, sensual fantasies, animalistic tendencies, and temporary gratifications. Most gyms, nightclubs, and bars are home to such people. These pleasures are physical and tamasic, hovering on the animalistic. On one hand, sex leads to the depletion of the aura. On the other hand, you could reach higher levels of consciousness in the moments of climax. The simultaneous unison causes an outburst of energy, even though the Kundalini gets raised, if only for a few seconds. If this phenomena happens simultaneously for both partners, then that joint surge of energy leads to unison and the amalgamation of what is normally considered as the energies of Shiv Shakti. Those moments enrich both partners with each other's energy, and duality is transcended. For that split second, a person loses consciousness of being an individual self. The me is replaced by the us. The Mooladhara chakra is also home to negative emotions of anger, greed, delusion, and fear of death. It leaves you strongly attached to material things. A person dominated by this chakra tends to sleep at least 10 to 12 hours a day. My part-time barber and part-time philosopher Aslam Mia recited a beautiful phrase. He said, "Saman 100 baras ka aur pal ki khabar nahi." At this level, the person generates a strong desire and attachment to worldly pleasures and objects, restricting spiritual growth. Delusion at its best. It is believed that there is a gland at the Mooladhara, like a knot, called the Brahma Granthi. You can call it the knot of samskars. This becomes an obstacle to the ascent of the Kundalini due to the person's obsession with the gratification of sensory pleasures. The ruler of the mind trap is ignorance. The embarrassment is common sense. Common, definitely, but sense, definitely not. To unblock the Mooladhara chakra, this knot must open, and only then can the Shakti rise through a valve which blocks water from rising when locked. Yoga recommends the willful withdrawal from the 5 senses through the science of pratyahar, the most significant part of the 8 limbs of yoga. Mantra jap can help, provided the mantra is siddh and relevant. The Gayatri Mantra qualifies as a perfect plumbing tool. Transcending this chakra helps achieve detachment from the fear of death and reduction of ignorance. Movement north takes you to different levels of pleasure. The next stop is the Swadhisthan chakra, governed by the element of water. It is the center of procreation, heightened emotions, and the sense of taste. It is at the level of the Bhuvarlok, or the astral twin of Earth, or Bhulok. The planets influencing at this level are Mercury and Moon, leading to fluctuations of moods and emotions. This chakra is home to desires, social aspirations, and emotional attachments. Some of the feelings people experience at this level are emotional love and romance, bordering on the theatrical. A शेर by Sardar Anjum talks about emotions. हम भटक कर जुनून की राहों में अख से इंतकाम लेते हैं. हम भटक कर जुनून की राहों में अख से इंतकाम लेते हैं. जब कहीं तेरा नाम लेते हैं, दिल से हम इंतकाम लेते हैं. दिल से हम इंतकाम लेते हैं. Sardar Anjum was a kind of neighbor who would drop into my place very often and have a long tea session from 3:30 to 7:30 in the evening. And though I felt his visits were slightly longer than I wanted, but I found him to be an amazing shair. And some of his shairis that he would recite to me, I have memorized in my mind, and I use them when I can. So, emotions bring creativity, and creativity leads to the formation of the personalities of artists and thinkers. It also brings spiritual bhavana, piety, and possibly even religious dogmatism. All these are emotions. A sort of bhajan land, if you will. Unfortunately, inspirations of this chakra have led to religious wars like the Crusades. In an emotional state such as this, duality rules over your mind. Where there is intense pleasure, there is also the other side of the seesaw, pain. In comparison to the Mooladhara chakra, the lust, greed, anger, and envy at this level is much subtler. Out here, a person desires to achieve self-esteem, chivalry, and is fond of entertainment. Adrenal rush is a characteristic of this plane. Swadhisthan chakra is primarily associated with the sense of taste. Self-claimed foodies are inmates of this chakra or this level. Addiction to substances, constant pleasure seeking, social affability, party hopping, sexual desires are all character traits of someone at this level. Sardar Anjum's Shairi justifies this. And I quote, सामने बैठे हुए ये कैसा जाम है, सामने बैठे हुए ये कैसा जाम है, जिसे छूना जुल्म है और छोड़ना इल्जाम है. By the way, Saturday night fever has nothing to do with temperature. It has to do with John Travolta and his Swadhisthan chakra. Self-definition takes place at this level where the individual defines himself or herself based on the self-reflecting data available in their subconscious and unconscious minds. This data of sanskars becomes a block to further rise, as latent karma disqualifies a person in their self-assessment. This becomes a major self-limitation. So, the only obstacle to you is you. That is why mantra jap, seva, and importance of gunas help to psych you into believing that you have potentially improved and are now better qualified to advance further. Seva and Mantra Vidya help create positive data in the unconscious, and the Atma identifies with these as qualifications for evolution. Worse than indulgence in pleasures and sensuality is the hangover memory of it, which keeps reflashing in the mind and becomes a constant disturbance. Fear of temptation versus faith in your belief system becomes a game where the winner of faith rises and the winner of fear and doubt falls. Vegetarian is also known to be a kind of help to awakening of this chakra. It is the level of tendencies which arise because of the sanskars bottled up in the unconscious layer of the mind, which conscious memory does not easily access. These samskars become trends and tendencies that lead to karma. At this level, faith often becomes an external force in the form of either a guru or a saint or a deity. This third force can become a form of hypnosis, which can propel a person to higher levels. I repeat, this third force can become a form of self-hypnosis, which can propel a person to higher levels because that person believes and has faith in the fact that he is qualified to attain those higher levels. The counterbalancing force of temptation based on negative data in the unconscious mind need to be overcome if these obstacles need to be crossed. This can certainly happen under the influence of an external force or superior willpower. Look at the cases of Vivekananda, of Vishwamitra, of so many other saints who climbed this ladder thanks to someone helping them climb and guiding them how to climb. Also, Gyan or self-knowledge help identify these issues, giving you the willpower to rise above. It is when the thorny bouquets of romance and intimacy finally wane that the consciousness can rise to the Manipura. I found a phrase appearing in my mind. It said, "Good taste is in bad taste. The pleasures of the Swadhisthan are worth a surrender." The third chakra lies at the solar plexus, governed by the element of fire. It drives the digestive system, fueling the body with the energy it requires. The Manipur chakra brings longevity, power, and intellect. हमारा बेटा बड़ा होके नाम कमाएगा is more like बड़ा होके मणिपुर चक्र तक जाएगा. A person at this level enjoys being authoritative. They relish power and recognition, making good organizers and effective speakers. They work with an air of vanity and self-projection. At this chakra, one is very particular about positioning and appearances, both in the way they look as well as how they come across to other people. Sense of aesthetics and beauty are refined. At this chakra, one has a domineering, perhaps even arrogant or egoistic personality. One maintains rank over others through dominating behavior. These are people whose every move is out of concern only for themselves. Diseases of indigestion and abnormalities of the internal fire of the body is due to the defects of the functioning of this chakra. The dominant quality is rajas, and it flows into behavior, self-pride, dominating personality, and you become a benevolent dilliwala. The word money means jewels, and Pur is location. What better place for the Delhi bellies? I guess Rajdhani must be a short form for Rajasthani. The power of Rajas when it aspires to change to sattva, becomes a very powerful force and can propel to higher levels. Spiritually speaking, Manipur is like the base camp of the Mount Everest of spiritual evolution. Here, a person has certainly reached a particular level of consciousness and overcome the domination of tamas. It is far easier to climb towards the peak from base camp rather than from sea level. It is considered the heaven equivalent in the microcosm, corresponding to the Swarg in the macrocosm. O Father who art in the Manipur chakra, hallowed be thy name. Jesus could have possibly oversimplified the concept of heaven for the simple minds that followed him. Manipur chakra is therefore your heavenly abode, though a slightly arrogant and egoistic one. Many practitioners of different forms of yoga, spirituality, and worship dwell at this level. The pleasures of kingship, impressiveness, self-projection, pride start taking a back seat, and humility infiltrates as you meditate on this chakra. The Dilli wala becomes a Bikaner wala, understanding fully well that there is further to go. Dilli abhi dur hai applies. Jokes aside, this is a plane of great transformation from khud to khudai. Henceforth, the pleasure grid changes to subtler, creativity at a higher level, meditativeness. Instead of giving a party, you become a party to give. Your aura expansion and holding capacity become enhanced. Take pleasure in that. Overcoming the sense gratification of the chakra is not easy. A thing of beauty is a joy forever is a very limiting phrase. The planes or lokas beyond heaven are minimalistic and plain looking. So, an attachment to aesthetics becomes an obstacle to surmount. Overcoming the attraction to beauty is a qualification that will take you higher, changing your desire from grandeur to a life of grounded practicality and minimalism. So why not practice that? In the afterlife, you can rub shoulders with the Father who art in heaven. And when your qualifying karmas are spent in the splendor of your heavenly abode, you may be reborn as a person of great importance on the earth level. The Anahata chakra, have a heart, is the apt cliche for this chakra. But my heart beats for you is not the right one. Infatuation and romance motivated by sensuality have been left behind at the lower chakras by the time you reach here. The Anahata chakra at the level of the heart is connected to air and skin. It signifies balanced love, which is not an emotional quid pro quo, but unconditional, unemotional love. The extract of a poem by Shakespeare tells this story well. I quote, "Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever fixed mark that looks upon tempests and is never shaken." Blah, 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 blah. So love at this level can be considered more to be caring rather than emotional bonding and romance. There is a hint of emotion, but much lesser than at the lower levels. The heart chakra is all about balance. The energies of Shiv Shakti also find a balance at this level of consciousness. There is balance in duality. In an oversimplified sense, you can think of it as the balance sheet of your inner being showing no profit, no loss. The mind indulges in the physical, but also becomes aware of the metaphysical. understanding the need for a balance between the physical and ethereal body. One realizes the value of philanthropy and philosophy. Material pleasures, vanity, and superfluous desires are buried underground. There is a heightened level of the inner voice or conscience. The yogic kriya of pratipaksha bhavana or opposite emotions is a common practice here. The seat of the Jivatma is at the level ensconced in the Atmaram or the bone enclosure for the Jivatma at the level of the rib cage. Yogis believe that it is here that Anahata or the unstruck sounds are produced. Zen refers to it as the sound of one hand clapping. Basically, it is the inaudible sound or static which pervades the entire earth. The kind of background music which you can't hear at regular decibels. Scientists believe that the infrastructural sound is that of the Om. In the microcosm of our bodies, the U of the Om or the center of the Om resonates at this point. The A or starting at the Manipura or the stomach chakra and the Ma ending at the level of the throat or Vishuddhi chakra. An unknown phenomena even in the scriptures, but almost a certainty in my mind and experience, is that a person's capacity to hold aura and keep it magnetized increases at this level. It keeps increasing at further levels. We have traversed beyond the heavenly abode to the qualification level of the Maharloka. Willpower enhanced, a person is able to use their Shakti to help others. Energy at this level is generating and emanating, and one learns to understand Maya and delusion. The perception of pleasure begins to change to less physical. A person learns to negotiate with his or her mind, to not be overwhelmed with emotions, and start practicing sense control. Peace of mind increases. Pleasures at this level are far more refined and subtle than at the levels that precede it. When a person exits life at this level, they dwell in the Maharloka in the afterlife, a plane even higher than heaven. Their next birth is as an important person with qualities to motivate and influence many.
The Vishuddhi chakra. The element connected to this throat chakra is space or akash. The good news is that at this level you're not spaced out. It is also connected to the sense of hearing, and the karam indris are the ears and mouth. The Vishuddhi chakra, like the throat, is a passage to higher spiritual planes. At this level, beings are much more evolved than at the lower four chakras. We are at the fifth level, remember. Stan Lee conceived his Marvel Comics superheroes probably at this level. So don't be surprised to see Batman, Robin, Spider-Man, Catwoman and others at this level too. Probably they would be considered junior kids on the block. At higher levels, only super beings dwell. Yogis, Mahatmas, spiritual teachers dwell at the level of the Vishuddhi. They have controlled emotions, deep self-respect, and humility that has infiltrated their psyche. They are highly intuitive. Whether celestial music or eloquence, these beings have complete control over the sense of sound. You can consider them to be masters of the tongue, almost mesmerizing. This being the last of the senses, a person is almost entirely in control of their sensory pleasures and temptations. In yogic terms, pratyahar and dharana is a done deal. Dhyan is a current practice, but samadhi needs a step up.
Duality is almost history here, and you realize the traps and delusions of Maya need to be overcome. You have bought into the equity of Gyan, and now all that is required is practice, practice, and more practice. At this level of human consciousness, the dream state now acquires the ability of visions and psychic experiences. This chakra is associated with the planet Guru, and many of the qualities connected with Jupiter become active in a person. The pleasures at this level are minimalism, attainment of calmness, selfless seva, and desire to benefit and care for others. But all this without much emotion, more so as a part of an involuntary routine. This is now possible due to the balance acquired earlier at the level of the Anahata. At this stage, one seeks truth beyond limitations of the physical realm, like time, conditioning, emotional constraints, and so on. The life and teachings of Kabir speak a lot about this consciousness. I quote, Kabira khada bazaar mein mange sabki khair. Kabira khada bazaar mein mange sabki khair. Na kahun se prem, na kahun se bair. Na kahun se prem, na kahun se bair. A complete balance of emotions. A perfect state of happilessness. The Agnya chakra or the Tapalok. This is the most exciting chakra level to reach. It is the level of unition and non-duality. The Ida and Pingla nadis, which are an infrastructure for duality, meet and merge to form the Sushmana nadi. The amalgamation of Shiv Shakti have already happened here. This level qualifies for a visa to the Tapalok, just one below the crown chakra or the Satyalok. The location where consciousness meets the chakra is between the eyebrows, at what is called the third eye or Agnya chakra. At this stage, one can induce visions of the past, present, as well as the future. The Agnya chakra level is the level of Shiv consciousness. A knower does a person become. Self-realization is completed, and I am that, or Aham Brahmasmi, is the mission statement of such a being. The person does not get a swollen head, but surely a swollen aura. True bhakti, which is the worship of the self, is the curriculum. One realizes that the spirit is immortal and in a temporary body that changes with every birth. I was lucky to reach this point in the mid-80s, but when I told Gurudev, he lowered my kundalini and said, तुझे बहुत मजा आने लगेगा और तू यहाँ फंस जाएगा. At that time, my heart sank and I felt like a victim, like I was being robbed of an achievement. But I now understand and see his foresightedness. In the initial phase of Kundalini rising to this level, I would get flashes of information through audio hearing. I would be given names of newborns, some of which were surprising. I would get to know about some events of the future. In a couple of cases, I got specific messages from spirits. I remember Nandalalji had a shop in the main market area in central Mumbai. He told me that every time he tried to rent it, something would go wrong and he could not rent it out. When I visited the shop, I locked it spiritually with a Lakshman Rekha called Kilna to lock the negative energy therein. I could sense the entity getting trapped and unable to escape my keel. It then asked for forgiveness and told me that he was Nandalal's mama or maternal uncle. On my insistence, he promised to leave and not prevent the renting out of the shop. Nandalal was shocked how I knew about his mama, as he had never mentioned it. I believe he said that his mama had committed suicide a long time ago. The shop got rented, and in the words of Sherlock Holmes, it was case closed. Later, I saw a future event on a screen in my forehead, and that happened shortly thereafter. So, this level of consciousness is the most exciting. More so because the danger of slipping back to a lower chakra or a lower level ends here, and you find player beyond mayor, the way the Punjabis would say it. And yet there is more to evolve, to reach the absolute peak of the Everest of spirituality. The human robot is still to become. The final frontier is inches away. Shiv has happened, but Guru consciousness is still a step away. The pleasures are indescribable because they are not felt, nor is pain. It's like a trance in your waking state, and one can't be in a better state. The Agnya chakra is also called the Guru Charan, or the Guru's feet. It is here that the journey ends, ascending from the feet of the Guru at the level of the eyebrow to the back of the head. Not an easy journey, because it is one of negation, where the layers of delusion have slowly but steadily been shed, until all that remains is the realization of the truth. Identification of the self, family ties, the baggage of samskars, the power of karma, all dissolve into non-existence. The triangle of knowledge, the knower and the known become unified and lose their segregation. I am reaches I am that. You are in a state of complete bliss. The optic of divinity within happened along the way. One is able to manifest one's desires, but ironically, one has transcended the need for anything at all. Here there is no intellectualism, no analysis, no emotions, no craving of the senses, no need for evolution, no desires. Only Sat Chit Anand, or the truth is bliss. As we are discussing the different layers of pleasure, try to imagine what you can't imagine, in a manner of speaking. To attain this level of pleasure, you have to do nothing, only undo everything. Bhrigu used the word sarvvyapi, or omnipresent. He said about Gurudev that Divya Atma अपने स्थान पर वापस चली जाएगी और सर्वव्यापी हो जाएगी. The divine soul will go back to its own location from where it has come and become omnipresent. I saw him in that state of consciousness several times, often at his farm where there weren't too many around him. His voice sounded deeper and scaringly profound in that state. My Guru Bhai said that this was his Guru Roop. He would know what was happening to whom, when and where. Before eating his late dinner, he would close his eyes and sometimes he would put the food back into the plate untouched. If he saw that one of his devotees or disciples had not been destined to get a meal, he would sacrifice his and assign it to them. One of his Dilliwala disciples decided to test him by saying nasty things about him while in the confine of his own toilet. The next day his toilet monologue was exposed. The man always knew what you were thinking. To me, this was evidence of omnipresence, and that he showcased while still physically alive. It is true that the above cited examples could be an occurrence of the third eye level as well. But, and a real but, in a certain form or rupa, and at the level of awareness of the Sahasrara chakra, he identified as Shiva and treated many Devi Devtas as his creations. I may not have proof of this, but it is an observation that I did make. I often saw him oscillate among the different levels of consciousness, mainly the higher ones. For example, I was all alone in the room with him, and out of nowhere he said, "Teri maa Kali Devi hai." A couple of minutes later he said, "Kali teri dadi hai." What made the relationship change in a couple of minutes? The first phrase was spoken in Shiv consciousness at the level of the Sahasrara. The second, as a disciple of Shiva at a lower level of consciousness. Today when I reflect, I remember sometimes he would say, "Main Shiv ka shishya hoon." On other occasions, he would showcase the manifestation of Shiva himself. At the level of the Sahasrara lies the original Shivling, which looks like a short clove, similar to what you get when you carve out the inner flesh of a dried coconut or copra. This is the controller of the life force, and death occurs only when the force exits at this point. The pleasures of this level are a realization of self-divinity, an unemotional mind, less plagued with thoughts, no attraction of the senses, and an overall sense of bliss and knowingness. Before we end this session, I am reminded of a phrase Gurudev often narrated, "Tapo Raj, Rajo Narak," which means that after a lot of spiritual indulgences, one gets the benefit of a wishful life of great significance. But after receiving this kingship, one normally goes into a reverse flip by losing all those gains by leading a non-productive life of negative karma and luxury and spending and living absolutely carelessly. So what are the takeaways from this discussion? The definitions of pleasures change as the definer evolves. To one, pleasure is sensuality. To another, celibacy. At one level, gross animalistic tendencies are a pleasure. At another, robotics, or a state of hardly any feelings. At one stage, people don't love themselves and yet try to show it through objects and possessions. At another, they worship themselves. So why show anything? Between these two extremities, somewhere is where you are. The question is, where do you want to be? My journey has been one of effort and practice to acquire a taste for the subtle and exhaust the tendencies of the lower depths. I found Seva to be more than just good deeds. I found it to be a tool of self-definition. The fact that Seva was a part of my destiny made me understand that my assessment of self-worth was probably discounted. If I was blessed with the traits of greatness, then maybe greatness was my fate. It is also yours. You need to see it. You need a greater self-image. You also need to take pleasure in greater things. Amen.
Wow. Did not think that the chakras and the kundalini would explain the different layers of pleasure to us. There has been a lot of self-analysis that has happened in these 40 minutes, and I hope that's happened for all of you in the audience today. Yeah. So the discussion today was not about the chakras or kundalini, but it was understanding the different hierarchy or layers of pleasure that we need to transcend through the chakras and kundalini. And now for the question and answer. So if we can
Sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. The first question that we have here is
Can
how.
can I precede that first question?
Sure.
Basically, I just wanted to summarize the talk in 2 sentences.
Ji.
By and large, we all we were trying to prove is that these senses, which are called Gyan Indriyas, in my personal opinion, they are Gyan Indriyas, because
Thank
these
you.
are the Gyan Indriyas that actually give us delusion, connected to the mind naturally. So, my whole submission to all of you is: see, if we want to make this purpose of life happen, and I'm not talking about the purpose of physical life, I'm talking about the purpose of our entire existence as all aspects of us. If we want this to be a successful purpose of life, then these things we need to somehow sort of. I'm not saying you can overcome all of them. I still enjoy eating a slice of cheese, and I also have some choice of chocolates, and this is a sense of taste. So I do have these defects. I'm sure all of you do, and all of us will. But the point is, if these are not obsessions, then we are able to actually negotiate them, and like you negotiate in while you're driving in traffic. And I have actually, Anjali, had the I mean, I've had the grace of Gurudev, where he took me through to different levels to the last. But it was only for a few minutes. And after that, it's business as usual. But the oscillation that happens must have the ability to oscillate from the lowest to the highest. That means the cleansing of the highest needs to be done. And then you will come back when you're sitting with friends and chatting. You will have a different level. When you're doing business and trying to motivate people, so this is how oscillation will keep on happening, and you can't be stuck at one chakra. But the point is, do I have the ability to oscillate to the top? That is critical. Now please ask me whatever you feel.
Taking that into consideration, the first the question is, how do we? You did mention that we build that ability through mantra vidya, through seva. Yeah, but how do we consciously be conscious and assess ourselves in terms of where we are at that, or where we are oscillating at that moment?
See, Anjali, there is no substitute to self-observation. If you can't observe yourself, then you need to hire a walking, talking human camera who keeps telling you every 3 minutes, okay, now you know what, you're feeling like eating this very nice chocolate, or now you're feeling like admiring the art, so you're getting stuck at the level of aesthetics. You can't have that, right? So you need to be able to first understand the subject. You need to have a basic working knowledge of the subject, and then you need to be able to observe all the time. Not all the time, but a lot of times you need to observe and feel a little conscious about the fact that I'm getting stuck at this this level of pleasure or that level of pleasure, which is basically rooted with the senses, right?
Absolutely. So here are, I mean, the assessment is also of our guna mix, if we understand clearly, in terms of the changes that we need to bring in, would also sort of influence our guna mix uh, to understand, like you said, the pleasures and the rajas, and we need to move more towards the sattva pleasures. But sometimes what somebody has questioned here is that not all of us would be destined to reach the Sahasrara chakra. So how do we break through that barrier and move further to the top, or the maximum that we can to the top?
Send me a check of 100 rupees, I'll tell you. No, see, Anjali, it is not. I mean, these are not subjects like, this is not a scientific subject where you say that if you put in so many pounds of pressure, the ball will rise so many feet higher. It is not a mechanical thing like that. you have to be able to, in your mind, first of all, you need to know that there is something called evolution. Most people don't even know there's a spirit inside of them. So how the hell will they know that there is a spirit body? How will they know that the spirit body needs to evolve? They don't have any clue about these. So once you have these clues and you've had these understandings and all that, then you need to have a very strong feeling within you, or a very strong intent, saying that, look, I, I've taken birth not because I wanted to buy expensive things. I'm not saying you don't buy expensive things, but buy expensive things, but without thinking about them as expensive things or brand things. You know, do whatever you have to. But that one intent must be there. This life is precious to me. I must take advantage of it. And this is the way you do it with seva, with working on your guna. How will you work on your guna mix unless you have a sense of self-observation? And how will you work on your guna mix if your senses are always, suppose you're stuck at the Mooladhara chakra and all you're thinking about is sensuality? How are you going to work on your guna mix? You're going to be stuck at tamas. So if you see that the guna mix is also correlated to the various levels.
Ji.
And also people talk about going to heaven. My friend Jesus, possibly poor fellow, didn't know what to do. How would he talk to people about beyond heaven? First of all, heaven itself was a big thing for him to teach people. And the trouble is, heaven is not what people believe. All the religions believe heaven to be the ultimate. There is nothing ultimate about heaven. It's halfway, not even half. It's at the level of the Manipur chakra. So when you cross Manipur chakra, you have to cross the North Star and then reach other dimensions.
Right. Hanji. There's a question here by Vivek Khandari saying that this talk reminded me of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, wherein a person goes up a triangle as they achieve things on the lower end of the triangle. However, unlike this hierarchy of pleasure seems to be subjected to spiritual snakes and ladders. So his question here is, what does it mean if someone shows traits of multiple chakras depending on time and circumstances?
No. He's absolutely right. I'm not saying that there is a segmentation where you put a tala on one chakra and say, "Cha, it was nice knowing you," kind of thing. No, that's not how it works. No? I mean, if you're a married person and there is some intimacy, then you're down to that Mooladhara chakra for those few minutes or hours or whatever it is. So this oscillation has to happen all the time. Unless you live like a sannyas ashram, But then if you're living a sannyas ashram, then you have to deal with the snakes and the bichus and the panthers and so it's not even easy to do that. So therefore, that sannyas ashram has to happen in your mind. And you have to be willing to accept the fact that you will oscillate between lower to less lower. I mean, many people don't reach an oscillation to the top or even halfway through. It is an effort and a lot of work to even cross that or to reach that Anahata chakra is not an easy job to do. But if you've reached there, you've definitely gone beyond heaven. So I mean, come on, you're not even in the heavenly abode. You're much above the heavenly abode. So I'm not saying in this one life you'll be able to reach the ultimate Satyalok or whatever, but we have to start working towards it.
Right. So I mean, I guess the question here on sannyasa is, there's a question here that says that can brahmacharya activate our chakras much sooner or take us transcend to the higher chakras much sooner? By Rajan.
So Rajan is probably thinking brahmacharya means celibacy. Possibly Rajan might be understanding brahmacharya, but brahmacharya is much more. It is about wanting to change from the usual trends and pulls and pushes and temptations. That is the ashram where you start conquering these things. And then you go into the grahastha ashram. And then you go into the vanaprastha. And then you go into the sannyas. So will brahmacharya help? Of course it will help. There is no one way. I mean, like, I don't know, if Rajan is from Delhi, then he must understand what I'm saying, that there are 3,000 ways to reach the Parliament House. And similarly, it is in spirituality. I mean, there are so many ways. Some people do it through Hatha Yoga, some people do it through Grahastha Ashram, some do it through meditation, and seva, some, I mean, so, through meditation, some do it through seva, some do it through mantra vidya. So there are many, many ways to reach that particular, climb or ascent. So yes, of course, brahmacharya will help, but that doesn't mean uh, that that doesn't mean you don't get married, or it doesn't mean you if you don't get married, it's fine. That is also a very powerful ashram, the brahmacharya ashram. But
But-
if you do get married, you're not committing sin.
And it doesn't mean that it is sooner than the others, right? That is his question. Would that be sooner than the others? Soon, the ascent would be sooner than the other parts of practicing seva or mantra vidya. So,
So it's a very lovely question. Uh, but unfortunately, the answer cannot be, cannot be put into certain parameters like A is equal to this and B is equal to this and C. It is never like that. The brahmacharya ashram can be practiced for thousands of years and you may get nowhere. And another person, like for example, meditation. A lot of people have talked at the Hingori Sutras platform about meditation, but I did not know how to spell the word, and I went into a very deep state of meditation, standing up. And I just lay down on my bed in a complete state of I don't know what to call it, cool, unanimated way or whatever.
inanimate, still.
Yeah, some jargon you can use. But I was in that kind of bliss. I never imagined such a kind of bliss. So now, where was the learning in this, and what were my efforts that led to it? I guess it was an all-round effort. Gurudev had already, taken my compass and turned it around, and so I was facing the opposite direction. Then he made me understand mantra vidya, made me do it, made me do a lot of seva. So he put all these things into practice, and once he did that, all that sort of amalgamated, and that's how these certain experiences happen. So can it happen with the brahmacharya? Of course it can. But does it have to happen if you're a brahmacharya? Not at all.
There's another question here by Ujjwal and Nakul about the Bindu Chakra. Does the Bindu Chakra exist?
What do you mean Bindu Chakra? I mean, see, I'm not a theoretician, Anjali. So if you ask me technical words from the scriptures, first of all, you'll have to tell me which scriptures and I'll have to read it before I answer. So I don't know what is the Bindu. There are not only these seven chakras. These seven chakras have just been identified as, how to simplify things. There are hundreds of chakras in the body at different parts, in the hands, in the ankles, in the feet, in so many places. So, uh, I don't know. If you really want to climb the ladder, just pull your shorts up or pull your trousers up and be mentally prepared and say, ye chadai to chadni hai, khatam ho. And then everything will fall into place. But one of the things that which today we are talking about, otherwise we'll go into various subjects. Today what we are talking about is your senses. Don't be proud of saying, "Oh, I'm a foodie. I love this. I am." Don't be proud of being a foodie. I mean, you can announce that you're a foodie, but be embarrassed about it because you're getting stuck at that level of the Swadhisthan chakra.
Right. Yeah. And while we talk about the senses, there's a question here by Jay Malhotra saying that emotions are the main reason for pleasures of the lower chakras. So my question is, someone who is emotional, is feeling the emotion a detriment or acting out on the emotion a bigger detriment?
I think Jay, I think I'm so maybe Jay should reword that question. But if I have understood him correctly, what he's saying is that instead of being emotional, is it all right if we act emotional? Is that what he's saying?
Yeah, to me it sounds like that. Yeah, right. So
So,
you pretend and just role play the emotion.
so I think so. The truth is, life is a role play, but we don't know it. So and it's awkward that we do not understand life as a role play and we look at it as a reality, and that is one of the delusions of the mind, and that's where Maya sort of holds us by the neck, and we sort of live with it and live in it. So yes, if we can be if we can act emotional and not be sort of obsessed by that emotion, then I think, Jay, you got somewhere.
Right. Mhm. Here we have another question. It's a little confusing, but when we are at a lower levels and are aware of it, how do we go up at that moment?
Okay. So first of all, if you're getting stuck, let's take the very commonest level of sensuality at the Mooladhara chakra. Okay, if you get physically attracted to somebody who you don't think you should be attracted to, and you try to work towards that fruitification of that attraction, so then you would possibly, if you're a person of awareness, you would have realized that, look, I don't think this is the way I should be going, and then you realize that this is not where you want to be. So then that needs willpower to break out of that thought. And the way to do it, Anjali, is the thoughts capture our mind and they keep going round and round. They keep connecting themselves to dots. And that's how we get trapped in the thought. One thought, and then we get trapped in that thought and allied thoughts. And those dots can go to multiple, variations of the same thing. And that's where we get stuck. So we have to break out of that one particular thought wave.
Right.
I'm assuming this is an answer to his question.
Mm. Yes, I think so. Yeah, and so it is. We are at a lower. Yeah, I think that's the answer to the question. And there's another question here. You did in the talk. You did mention about the Gayatri mantra. So, is the Gayatri mantra the best mantra, or can you please suggest some mantra that would help us rise? And this is by Vikram Mehra saying, please excuse my ignorance, but he just wanted to know which mantra would be the best to help us ascend.
I think that was a very wise statement. Please excuse my ignorance. Can only come out of the mouth or the finger of a very wise person. So I don't know. Vikram Mehra has possibly attained something to be able to phrase this question like this. So yes, I'm happy to answer that, Vikram. See, the Gayatri Mantra has two parts. One is the Gayatri Mantra as is known to the world, and one is the Gayatri Mantra uh, which was originally in existence, and it's called the Mahagayatri because it has a set of 8 words which complete the circle. When I say circle, it doesn't mean circle as in zero circle. It takes you and it. So okay, let me explain this. If any of you, it's a little confusing, this explanation, but I need to do it so that I can justify the answer. So if you have ever done shavasana, how do you raise that level of energy from your toes to your head? You keep focusing on your toes, then you focus on your ankles, then you focus on your whatever comes beyond the ankle, and then you focus on the thighs, and the knees, the thighs, the hip, vagara, 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 until you come to the head, right?
Yes.
So it is about touching mentally certain points. Now the Gayatri Mantra touches certain points. Those words of the Gayatri Mantra, though they are not meant to, they may not. The meaning is not. The meaning of the Gayatri Mantra, anywhere you might read it, even in the scriptures, it doesn't say that it touches points. But from my practical experience, Anjali, and from Gurudev's
Right.
learning, I have seen that the Gayatri Mantra touches you and raises your consciousness level because it's like a spiritual acupressure. and
Through the
and
vibrations, is
yeah,
it?
through the vibrations it energizes certain parts of you.
Okay.
And why the Mahagayatri is very considered, and all of you are qualified to get the Mahagayatri, not because you want it and not because you think you can buy into it, but because if you achieve what we expect from you, if you can do the things we expect from you, there is nobody happier than us to be able to share this Mahamantra with you. That Mahamantra, Anjali, takes you from the level of the Anahata chakra to the level of the Sahasrara chakra. Those are the touch points, the invisible touch points.
Right.
Am I making any sense or not?
Yes. Yes, you are. Yeah.
If I was a listener,
Very
I
deep.
wouldn't think so.
No, I think it's very deep, and there's a lot to process here. But the questions are coming in, and so I've got a lot of uh, questions now. When we spoke about taking it
So,
from
so
the
I want to add one line to Vikram.
Hanji.
And Vikram, this Gayatri mantra, just do it without going into the theory of it. Just do it, of course, use the words correctly, and do it as much as you can, whenever you can, wherever you can, and however you can.
Right. And yes, so Vikram has responded to that, saying thank you and pranam. There is a question here by Rakesh saying, what happens if one progresses some way up and then loses intent intent to progress and slips down all the way? Then is there an automatic recovery system, or is all the effort needed again?
No, this is possibly a very a question based on a social analysis of a subject. See, Anjali, it's like riding a cycle. If you ride a cycle and you can do it even standing, or I don't know how they ride, they leave your hands and all that kind of acrobatics on the cycle, etc. And if you become good at riding a cycle, and then you give it up because then you went into college, and then mommy and daddy bought you a scooter or a motorcycle or a gadi or whatever, and then but then suddenly after 20 years, if you get onto a cycle, I mean, you may stumble a little for some time, but that doesn't mean you won't know how to ride it. It's
Right,
just it's a very short passage to come back, and there is no complete loss. No.
right.
And let me tell you honestly, you know, uh, I mean, I think if I can confess some of my shortcomings, it might help Rakesh to correlate his shortcomings with mine, and then we can both be members of the same club. I spent about 10 years uh, taking a sabbatical from spirituality. I would go and do seva every month as it was my duty to do, and it was an obligation to do. But I had no interest left in spirituality for about 10 years. Not now, about 15 years back or something like that, 20 years back. So say between 20 years ago and 30 years ago, I lost all interest in spirituality. It was just the way it was. I didn't lose my faith, but I just lost interest in it. So I was busy doing all the rubbish in the world, business and this and that. I'm not saying it's rubbish, but I mean, I was just focusing and being obsessed by all that. And so what happened then? Suddenly one day it just came back, and I said, no, no, no. Oh, I'm wasting my time, and this sabbatical is now over. Let me get back to business, and it didn't take more than a few months or a few weeks actually to go back to where you were.
Right. So this leads to another question by Lalit Ving, which says that then that means that these chakras are associated not only with the body but also with our soul, right?
Yeah. The chakras are not physical endocrine glands as people normally say that they are shadow of endocrine glands, but these are actually chakras are energy points in our energy bodies.
So those changes, the pleasure that we're talking about is at a spirit level, where as we keep ascending and rising, it's the changes that happen are not at the physical level. Physical level, as described in our talk today, is just for us to understand where we stand and where we are stuck. Okay? But the actual changes happen at the spirit level. Is Are we understanding that right?
I talk about let's talk about fashion, Anjali. uh, एक शर्ट एक सूट पहना है तो उसके नीचे शर्ट पहनी है, उसके नीचे बनियान पहनी है कि नहीं?
Hanji.
That's exactly the way our bodies are. एक बनियान है, एक शर्ट है, एक सूट है. I mean, I'm saying it ridiculously, but all these are interconnected. I'm
Right.
not saying that the spirit body exists from the toe to the head. No, it compresses itself, and like a mini sculpture, and it sits on the in the Atmaram. But it has the capacity to be. So these chakras are connected to the physical body as well as the inner bodies as an amalgamated whole.
Right. Right. There's another question here by Arjun Tandon asking, can we transcend Maya by understanding and working on our pleasures? And if I understand it correctly, transcending Maya would be beyond the Ajna Chakra.
Yeah, perfectly said. But I have a very interesting question that I'm seeing on the screen by Gunwant.
Right.
Is it true that the soul exits through the crown
Exits.
chakra during death
And
time? The person gets liberation. I think it's a very interesting question that he has asked.
right.
This is the this is uh, the ambition of every Mahatma, yogi, saint, sage to exit through the Sahasrara chakra. It is the it is the it is a standard hope and intent, because when you exit through the Sahasrara chakra, you go straight to the top.
Right. Okay. Hmm. There's one question and that I would like to ask, if I may.
Hmm?
Anyway, at what point where are you when you start to think of surrender? Or when you start to slowly practice surrender or get conscious and start observing surrender within you.
Let me answer this question in a ridiculous manner, Anjali.
Right.
And I beg forgiveness from all of the listeners because I'm going to say something slightly scandalous.
Okay.
Look at a prostitute.
Yeah.
Her business is tamas.
G.
And yet, can she not, or does she not have the right and the capacity to be able to spiritually rise? Of course she does.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's a fantastic, I don't think she was a prostitute, but I think she was a great saint who was forced into prostitution, and her name was Rabia. She was a Muslim saint.
Right.
And when her owner, because she was a slave, uh, saw a huge light burning on her head at night when he came out, and she was probably meditating or doing whatever she was doing, that's the time he got petrified and he released her from his slavery and his ownership of her. And then she went on to become a great saint and has said many great things. So I don't think there is a point at which your intention of surrender can start. It can start anywhere. But the question is, for that surrender to happen, if that surrender does happen, then the person who is taking charge of you will have to, if he wants to do his duty or she wants to do her duty, she will have to or he will have to make you overcome all these traps of the senses, right?
Right. Right. Hmm.
There is a question by Sushmita Menden.
Yes.
How do we achieve the willpower to oscillate between the chakras?
J.
Well, I think willpower starts getting very intensified at the level of the Anahata chakra. But that's not the way to look at it. Willpower will get intensified when you, I think it's a combination of knowledge. When you realize many things and you understand many things, then that intention is built within you, because you realize, okay, if I do this, like for example, when children study for their exams, right?
Right.
I mean, they work crazily from day and night, and they're doing all kinds of projects, and they're studying till the early hours of the morning. I mean, it's not fun. I don't think there's any entertainment in it. But then why do they do it? It's because they see a goal.
Right.
That if I can do this, I can get a good job, or I can get into a good MBA program or whatever. So similar is it with this subject. If you want to if you want to go higher in this subject, then you need to know that, yes, I will have to put some sacrifices into place. I'll have to put some strategies into place, and I will have to put some curbs on my temptation into place. And what helps the most, Anjali, is the understanding of the mind
Right.
and how it works.
So would balancing of chakras mean that as well? Because the question here by Richa says, what is balancing of chakras?
I have no clue. I mean, I've heard this word 1,000 times, balancing of chakras, but I have no clue what they mean by that. But I do have a clue on what the subject is. I mean, if we can just remove the word balancing, because I don't understand that jargon, it is about cleansing of the chakras that I can talk about. And the cleansing of the chakras is what our speech has been about today. We have to be able to acquire those qualities that are required to climb from one to the other. For example, if you have a lot of control, if you're a control freak, and if you have a lot of anger, and if you have a lot of desire for self-projection, and you want to be seen and admired and liked and praised, you're going to get stuck at the Manipura chakra. So how do you get unstuck?
Right.
Well, the only way to get unstuck is to undo that strategy in your mind, or to undo that aspiration of I want to be recognized. Bada hoke naam kamayega. What are you talking about? I mean, what a misguiding set of parents who tell their children कि बेटा मेरा बेटा बड़ा होके नाम कमाएगा. क्यों कमाएगा?
Right. So I guess that answers the question of Ajay Natkarni also. The want of attainment is also a part of greed, right?
The want of attainment
Is also a part of greed then.
Yes, you can always find ways to, want of attainment is also, yes, it is. But Ajay Natkani is not wrong at all. But see, how do I say this? Many wrongs lead to the beginning of many rights. I mean, spirituality has to have a U-turn. Now, Ajay Natkani is very kind to take me into a completely different subject, but uh, there is a point where you reach a particular point by doing all the normal things like doing good karma and feeling okay, now I've done good deeds, now I need to do this, now I need to feed 100 people today, now I need to do this and that and blah blah, I need to sit in meditation between 4:30 and 5:30 and Brahma Murta and this Murta and that Murta, and I get myself into all this kind of logistics of spirituality, right? But
Right.
however wrong it might be, it does take me to a higher level, Anjali. And at that level, when I reach, I suddenly realize that I think the strategy needs an alteration. And then I take a U-turn. I take a U-turn, but I don't reach the starting point. I reach uh, a different longitude of the starting point. And then I restart. This time I restart by non-doership. You can't start spirituality with non-doership. I mean, you
Right.
have to go through the processes.
Okay.
But
True.
then when I take that U-turn and I come back and I restart my journey, I mean, there's no such thing as, I mean, there's not like a journey on a road कि वो U-turn लेके road से वापस आ गए और बांद्रा से निकले थे तो अभी बांद्रा में आ गए. It doesn't mean that. It means when I relook at my journey, re-strategize my future, then I will not think of doership. I will not think that karma is my doing. I will not think of all these things. I will not think of attachment. I will not recognize that family is family. I'll recognize delusion. I'll recognize Maya. I'll recognize that even I am a myth of a reality that I believe that I am. Then I'll start understanding that it is my mind which confuses my consciousness into thinking of this world as real. And it is my mind which confuses me to believe in what I perceive. And that's why people have called these senses as Gyan Indris. They aren't Gyan Indris, they are Gyan Indris.
Hanji. Right. I think this question also answers Asha Mirani's question on how do you remove delusion? Does it, or do we need to add something more to that?
See, Anjali, there are two ways that this can happen. I mean, I'm just trying to think of an answer which I think should be appropriate. See, there are things that have happened in our lives. In my personal life, I've had illogic work for me. Okay, uh, I never went into doing things that were meant to be done to achieve results that were meant to be achieved. These results happened without my knowing how. Okay, so what was that? That was the grace of power. And how did that power show its grace? It showed its grace through a being who looked, walked, talked, and dressed like a human. And he
Right.
was Guru. So it was the grace of the Guru that did so much for me that where would I know all these things? Really, the only scriptures I read were cowboy comics and seen, war movies. That's not a background for spirituality, right? I used to brew my own drinks and things like that, make my own liqueurs. And that's not a guy who's meant to get into a spiritual realm. But destiny did this. It took me to meet a man who was so powerful that he could actually demolish my existing personality and recreate it in his own what is the word, with his own desire or whatever, you know. So
His
that was
own
one way.
creation. Mhm.
That is one way. But it is not a structured manner. It's a very accidental way of attainment. The other way is you go by doing the things that are needed to be done. Your intentions have to be very clear. You must aspire you must aspire to fulfill your life's purpose, because your mind is going to think, right?
Right.
So if your mind is going to think, at least make it think some good stuff and some right stuff. At some point of time, you give up all these thoughts because you will have to, otherwise you will get stuck.
Okay.
But till that point doesn't come, and that point comes, I mean, you have to cross heaven and all that before you come to this point of the U-turn that I'm talking about, and before you come to the point of redefining spirituality for yourself. I mean, you can read about it in Yoga Vishesh, you can read about it in Patanjali, you can read about it in some of these books that have been published. But uh, when it comes to practically living those books, you have to be able to reach a particular point, and there you need. So can I tell you what Gurudev said? And I think he did a much better job than what I'm doing right now. He put it across in a very simple manner. He said, Shraddha, Vishwas, Seva,
Ji.
Gyan, and then Bhakti.
Right.
So without that Gyan, you cannot reach that level of Bhakti, which is the ultimate form of. It's not worshipping anything. It's about worshipping the non-existence of everything. That bhakti cannot happen without Gyan. So why do you think we do all these talks?
Right.
Basically, we are trying to manipulate people like Pooja Seth, Rajesh Rajan, Indra Sikand, Ajay Natkarni, Vishuddhi Agarwal, Richa Bhushan. These are the names I'm reading on the screen. My whole purpose in life is to manipulate all of them.
Right.
And to try and hypnotize these people into understanding कि भाई धंधा करना है,
जी.
अपने सिर्फ शरीर का धंधा नहीं करना है, अपने बीइंग का धंधा करना है.
Right.
I think that was a very long answer to a very short question.
No, Ji, like now, as you mentioned about Gurudev, so there is this question by Om Vadva, which says that Gurudev mentioned that, I mean, you mentioned it, but do we have the ability to oscillate to higher levels, and how can we judge that in ourselves without a guru's help or guidance?
That's a very interesting question. So I think when you do self study, there are complications to it. when you have somebody who's already done the self-study and already crossed his college and is already in the PhD sort of curriculum, then that person can easily teach a 7th standard or an 8th standard person in very easy terms of what to do, how to do, and where to do it, right?
Right.
So a guru can definitely be a great uh, benefactor. But does that mean that you can't do it without? Of course you can. What about Ashtavakra? Not Ashtavakra. What is the name of the guy? Guy who Dronacharya cut off his finger.
Uh, so sorry, struggling audience, please help.
Not
This
he was the best archer in the
Eklavya.
Mahabharata.
Eklavya.
Huh? Eklavya.
Eklavya.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Eklavya did it on his own, right? Even Buddha. I mean, I must give Buddha credit that he did have multiple gurus. But I think none of those gurus were even half as advanced as he was. In fact, one of his original gurus became his disciple at some point of time. So Buddha somehow did it on his own almost, right?
Right. Right. So here again, it's the intent that would work for you.
Well, it's a lot of things, no, Anjali. I mean, I will not be able to have that intent until I've had a background of previous lives where these, stored karmas have all this conditioning in my mind. Like, for example, how come I could turn around from being an absolute vagabond to a non-vagabond? I mean, it is Gurudev explained to me one day, and I did not want to go into previous lives, etc. But he said, "Okay, in my last life, I was a spiritual person, and must have been part of an ashram, and that he said your ashram is still alive, and people still come to your to come and pay respects at your gaddi." I didn't want to know, so this is the background. So that background made it very easy for this. Like I was giving you the example of riding a cycle. If you've ridden a cycle in your childhood, then it becomes much easier to ride a cycle, even if you after 20 years of not being able to ride it or not knowing how to ride it or forgetting to ride it or whatever. So some backgrounds also help. Then some people are very lucky. Like, for example, there's a Guru Bhai of mine who died a year or two back. Name was Sant Lalji from Sonipat. So Gurudev had told him that he had come to Gurudev multiple times in multiple lives, but would leave.
Okay.
And in this life, he came there and stuck. So, but those multiple lives where he was not successful was also paving the road for success of this. Now, I can imagine, I can see some of the brains working right now, and they are saying, but then if we have not done this in our last life, then how could we? How do you know? How do you know? Why are you sitting here and listening to this talk? You could have been watching Prime or Netflix, but you're listening to this talk because you're interested in yourself. And if you're interested in yourself, there is a background. And if there's a background, there's potential and potency.
Right.
There was this very fancy guy, I forgot. I'm very bad at memory. Who was this guy who, was it Thomas Edison or one of these characters, who was thrown out of school, and his mother lied to him and said that,
They said that you were too bright to be taught.
yeah, you'll be too bad. And when she died, he found the letter where the teacher has said that your son is, in very Angrezi, manner, she has said that your son is not fit to this, that, and the other. He's not capable of it, so it's better you teach him at home. And this guy became one of the world's most famous, not famous, but most successful scientists or discoverers. So, how do you know that there is an Edison in you or there is not an Edison? I mean, there's always a first time, there's always a second time, a third time, a 10th time. So forget about the past and just go for it.
Right. To believe in yourself or in the truth, or
Well, see, spiritualism is not a one-line subject, no, Anjali. I mean, it is a one-line subject, but that one line is probably bigger than 100 books. And that one line is, I mean, I got this sentence that came to my head automatically. And I was also, it took me 5 minutes to understand what this sentence meant. It said, nothing is and everything isn't. So if you go into the depth of
Wow.
this subject, all spirituality can be summed up in these in these 4 words.
Right.
How long it will take to really live that?
Gee.
So
Lifetime.
I think you owe, all of you, all of us, we owe ourselves the usage of our time on this planet. And self-counseling helps a lot. Self-observation helps a lot. And if you have this daddy bear or mummy bear who sort of twists your ears and puts you into the right direction, that helps a lot more.
Right. So if we have to sum up the talk today, what would be your advice to the audience as the main takeaway of, and what would that advice be in terms of practice?
I think people must recognize the fact that the mind is not an easy instrument to negotiate. People must recognize that the mind will not capture, but magnetize thoughts from the atmosphere and from within the deep recesses of its own causal body, and it will keep bringing those thoughts into the head. So one must have the ability to not take every thought seriously and be motivated by the thought. One has to be able to what is the word? Unidentify or disidentify?
Unidentify. Or
One has to be able to unidentify with most thoughts and recognize them as thoughts that have to come and go. But the moment you get stuck with them, then you know you're playing a delay process.
and disengage with them as well.
Sometimes you can't disengage, so you just say, You know what I'm saying? Like if you hear
Right.
somebody singing out of tune, what do? Go and hit that guy on the head? No, you just say, yeah, out of tune. So same thing you have to say to your mind, sorry, buddy, doesn't work for me.
Right.
Most people take their mind so seriously, they take their thoughts so seriously, they don't realize that these thoughts just keep flowing in. That the radio is nothing more but a transmitter of a recording that it does not create, right?
Right.
So they take responsibility for their thoughts, they take ownership of their thoughts, they get involved and indulge in their thought, and that's a mess.
Right. Right. And I think with this, we've covered almost all questions.
Okay.
And would love to thank you for this session. And if there are any more questions, dear audience, please do write into us at answers.hingorisutras@gmail.com. And we'd be happy to answer them. And with that, thank you very much, sir. Thank you for this session. And thank you, dear audience. Good night. Sayonara. Khuda